Good afternoon, everyone. I don't normally have a visual, but I wanted to point out that we had a discussion at lunch today on this Congressional Commission on National Security. What's interesting about it is these were members appointed by the leadership, both Senate and House, Democrats and Republicans, and they reached a unanimous view about the state of our national defense. Unanimous. These were people on the Democratic side appointed by Schumer and Jeffries, for example. Some of the takeaways are extraordinarily important because we know the American people, at least at the moment, other than watching wars around the world, are not focused on the new threats that lie ahead. Let me start by saying to you what I said in the meeting in there. Even though deterrence costs money, it's a lot cheaper than wars. And I think a way to look at that is to look at some history of defense spending. Right now, the current expenditure in this country is 2.7% of GDP. 2.7 right now. During the Carter administration, 4.9. The Reagan buildup, 6%. The Vietnam War, 8.6%. The Korean War, 16.9%. And the cost of World War II at its height, 37% of GDP. So I think the takeaway is pretty obvious. It's a lot cheaper to prevent wars than it is to get in one. And so we're confronted now with this axis of evil, all communicating with each other, North Korea, Russia, China, Iran, and Iran's proxies. And they're waiting to see if the same country that ran out of Afghanistan is going to pull its punches. The best way to prevent the next war is to be prepared for it. And I know that's why I think this report is so significant, because it made up of people appointed by the current leadership, both Republican and Democrat.
Concur with everything the leader just said about national security. Today we're going to have another show vote in the Senate, and I would remind everybody here that the outcome of that show vote is not going to be any different than it was when we had this same vote 3 months ago. And let me just again remind everybody that Republicans support IVF full stop. No question about that. This is not an attempt to make law. This is not an attempt to get an outcome or to legislate. This is simply an attempt by Democrats to try and create a political issue where there isn't one. In the meantime, there's a lot of unfinished business that's not being attended to by the Senate. The most important issue we deal with every year, most consequential issue, is funding our military. You just heard it from Senator McConnell. And the defense authorization bill has been available for floor consideration now for 3 months. It passed out of the committee a long time ago. And here we are sitting around while the defense authorization bill collects dust in Schumer's office, something that we ought to be working on and legislating. There hasn't been a single appropriation bill brought to the floor, even though all 12 of the appropriation bills have cleared the committee. The Senate, for all intents and purposes, under the Democrat leadership today and Senator Schumer, has shut down They are not doing anything consequential. They are simply just riding it out, hoping that they won't have to cast any hard votes before the November elections. Honestly, the American people deserve much better than what they're getting out of the Democrat leadership here in the Senate. And certainly when it comes to the issues of national security, our homeland security, that are critically important to the well-being of the American people, this institution ought to be doing a lot better, and it's going to take a change in leadership in order for that to happen, I'm afraid.
Kamala Harris is doing everything she can to run and hide for her terrible position on the border. Why? Well, because she understands that the American people completely reject the Biden-Harris open border policies. She wants people to forget that she's the one that orchestrated and oversaw the disaster at our southern border. Her failures have been costly and deadly. Because of her failures, American citizens have been raped and murdered by illegal immigrants. Because of her failures, fentanyl continues to flow across the southern border. Now she pretends that she wants to secure the border. Nothing could be further from the truth. She's the one that started this stampede of illegal immigrants, those from criminal cartels, the drug dealers, the terror suspects. She stood and cheered when Joe Biden stopped building the wall that was already in the middle of being constructed. She stood in support when Joe Biden signed 94 executive orders throwing open the border. For 4 years, she's done everything she can to undermine our border laws. Now that 10 million illegal immigrants have come into the country, now that you've seen the videos of criminal gangs taking over apartment complexes and parts of cities, now that she came to the Senate floor and broke the tie to send American taxpayer dollar checks, stimulus checks to illegal immigrants, now all of a sudden she says she wants to get tough on the border. She doesn't. She's had 4 years to do it. She's refused. And if she's elected President of the United States, she will never secure the border.
Okay, how many of you have ever heard of the game Twister? Okay, we're going to bring the floor mat in and you guys can participate. Okay, so Americans have had enough of Kamala Harris's tongue twisters. Their pocketbooks see straight through all of her crooked lies. So she's claiming to be a friend to small business, but prices are, let's see if it works. Oh, well, gosh. Okay, spinning out of control. All right? I tried. I really tried. Thanks, Shelley. Okay, so blue. Okay, no, right hand on blue. Biden-Harris administration has imposed a tangled web of over 1.6 trillion, with a T, trillion dollars in regulatory costs. After the tie-breaking votes for radical spendings, and we see this every day, whether it's gas, grocery prices, Americans are seeing a 20% price increase. That's due to her tie-breaking votes. Now our San Francisco liberal is leaning more to the left to force communist price controls. Communism, get it? Kamala, communism. So if Kamala had a plan that worked, she wouldn't need to get bent out of shape selling us on her day one strategy. And I'll remind you folks that should she see her day one, it's not actually a day one because she's actually been in office 4 years and has done not a darn thing about the cost to Americans. So no matter how she twists it, let me set the record straight. She owns the crises at the White House. So thank you all. We'll be seeing you on the mat later.
Well, I wanted to talk about something similar to what Joni has talked about, but I also have a chart, but doesn't have a spinner, but it's compliments of Axios. This was in, I saw it tweeted in yesterday, I believe. And what this tells us is what we know. The vice president has said that she's going to start an opportunity economy when she's elected. I'll give her an opportunity. She's had 3.5, more than that, years to do something about what we see on this chart. And what we see is the price of bread going up over 30%, the price of ground beef over 33%, the price of rent up over 25%, the price of gas over 33%, up prescription drugs up over 8%, and on and on and on. What does she say she's going to do? She's going to give $50,000 to an entrepreneur to start a new business. She's going to give $25,000 for people to have a down payment for a home. Yet the $889 additional that West Virginians are paying at the grocery store and for their rent, which totals over a year over $10,000, is something she's had the opportunity to make a difference on in the last 3.5 years. And all she has done, and the president have done, is inflate prices. They're touting that inflation is down. We're not stupid. We know that inflation rate is down, but the prices don't come down. It just means they go up slower, and they stay at these levels and continue to rise. So this, to me, is the issue of the presidential campaign. She's had an opportunity for over 3.5 years to make a difference, to give everybody an opportunity, and the opportunity she's given is for every American family to pay over $10,000 more a year for the basic essentials of life.
I do find it a bit humorous. You hear Kamala Harris talk about on day one, to translate the 3.5+ years, that's over 1,300 day ones she's had so far. But say what she has been doing. This administration's policies are harming our Montana way of life. Let me give you an example. Just last week, we got the terrible news that the Stillwater mine laying off 700 miners at the mine. It's just south of Big Timber in Columbus, Montana. It's a very important strategic mine for our country because it produces palladium and platinum. Now, these are really good paying jobs. These mining jobs are in the 6-figure range, plus a very healthy and generous benefits package. These mines produce platinum and palladium. They're used in cars and catalytic converters to reduce the pollution that comes out of the exhaust, as well as in electronics. And instead of getting palladium from Montana mines, Biden and Harris are allowing Russia to flood the market. That is why the layoffs occurred. The Russians are flooding the U.S. market. There's very few producers of palladium in the world. They drove the price down and forced the mine to have to lay off about half their workforce, 700 miners. In adding insult to injury, Vladimir Putin uses that money to fund his war in Ukraine. So the consequences of this administration's obsession with radical environmentalism, otherwise known as the Green Dream, and now we're bearing the brunt of these policies. Here's another example. I can tell you Montanans are tired of breathing smoke during fire season. Last week, there was a kids' sporting event in Boulder, Montana, canceled due to smoke from wildfires. This is a result of Montanans and many out west of not being able to get in and thin and manage their forests. Proper thinning is a way to reduce the risk of wildfires. And why is that? I'll tell you why. The Ninth Circuit Court, one of the most liberal in the country, buries our forest managers in litigation and doesn't allow them to manage the forest. They're spending all their time with lawyers and litigation instead of getting loggers into our forest to thin them. They've tied up 300 million board feet of timber in Montana in litigation. That's just in Montana alone. That's enough to build nearly 25,000 homes. The Biden-Harris EPA, do you know what we call the EPA out in Montana? The Employment Prevention Agency. They've launched a war on Montana's coal strip. They've launched a war with EV mandates. This is the biggest war on main American energy we've seen, certainly in my lifetime. So the American people must reverse this course. 7 weeks from today, 49 days away, we'll have an election, and we've got to let the American people speak loud and clear. They want to change the direction of this country and remove Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from office.
Well, we all missed you last week. You're back.
Yeah, I missed you all too. Over the past week since the debate, Trump and Vance have been advancing this internet rumor of Haitian migrants eating pets in Springfield, Ohio. The governor has concerns about this, so does the mayor. Should they stop saying that?
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the presidential contest. Alex?
Susan Collins said yesterday that a 6-month CR could have a devastating impact on defense spending. Do you think your House colleagues should drop this idea of 6-month CR and do a 3-month CR until December?
I think we first have to wait and see what the House sends us. My only observation about this whole discussion is the one thing you cannot have is a government shutdown. It would be politically beyond stupid for us to do that right before the election, because certainly we'd get the blame. And one of my favorite old sayings is there's no education in the second kick of a mule. We've been here before. I'm for whatever avoids a government shutdown, and that'll ultimately end up, obviously, being a discussion between the Democratic leader and the Speaker of the House as to how to process avoiding government shutdown.
Leader McConnell, despite that 2.7, I think, % figure on a percentage of GDP spending on defense, we are still expanding our military presence and agility in the Indo-Pacific, including most recently reports that we're reclaiming runways on Tinian that were used to launch atomic bombs against Japan during World War II, and doing that to counter any threat by China. Are we doing enough? Are we moving fast enough to defend and face up to any challenge to our Pacific allies like Taiwan and the Philippines?
That's precisely what this report says, that we aren't doing enough. And as I pointed out, it's a lot cheaper to prevent war than to be in one. And so we need to get defense spending heading in the right direction. The NDAA, during that debate, Roger Wicker and others, I think with only 3 dissents, laid out a plan beyond 1 year of getting us to a higher place. The message is clear. We're not doing enough to avoid war. The only way to do that is to convince both sides, which is what happened here. Believe me, the Democrats that Schumer and Pelosi and Jeffries put on here were not conservatives, but they all agreed on the outcome. And so I think that's an encouraging sign and a good message to all the rest of us about what we need to be doing.
Senator McConnell, do you think that it's appropriate now for the Secret Service to get more funding, and should it be a part of these conversations around the continuing resolution, given the attempted assassination attempts on former President Trump? More funding from the Secret Service. Are you in support of more funding for this?
Yeah, I'm certainly open to that. We want to get a report on this latest incident. If increasing the funding is part of the solution, I'm for it.
Thank you.